Hello everyone. Today I just thought for a difference we'll start with some case scenarios so that the topic is more interesting. So here we are and the first case is about a 45-year-old who presented with an inability to close the left eye for 2 weeks. He also had redness in the eye which is associated with watering and photophobia. Systemic examination revealed hypopigmented anesthetic skin lesions in his back and also thickened ulnar nerves. Oblique examination of the eye revealed lag of thalamus and exposure keratitis, which is stained with the fluorescent dye, and the diagnosis was a lower motor neuron seventh nerve palsy on the left. On the left. So this is a picture of the person. You can see the circumcorneal congestion, the exposure keratitis, and the lag of thalamus. And forcible closure of the eyelid, you can still see that a little bit of the cornea is still exposed here. So his Bell's phenomena is inadequate. So coming to case 2, a 62-year-old female presented with a sudden decrease in vision in the right eye since 2 days. Her past history revealed that she was a diabetic for the past 30 years and was on insulin. She was not on regular eye examination follow-up, and her fundus revealed a vitreous hemorrhage in the right eye, indicating that it was a proliferative diabetic retinopathy. So this is a picture of vitreous hemorrhage. You can see it's actually pre-hyaloid. It's a boat-shaped hemorrhage. So coming to case 3. Here is a 35-year-old male who had complained of a headache intermittently since 2 months. He was checked up for refractive errors and he didn't have any refractive errors though. His vision was 6 by 6 in both the eyes. And fundus revealed the papilledema. So papilledema is nothing but disc swelling, bilateral disc swelling due to increased intracranial tension. And on closer examination, you were able to see, you were able to pick up a grade 4 hypertensive retinopathy. Examination of his BP, blood pressure, indicated that it was 200 by 110 millimeters of mercury. So it was a case of grade 4 hypertensive retinopathy. So this is the picture showing papilledema. You can see the swollen disc with hemorrhages and cotton spots. So coming to case 4, an 8-year-old female child presented with redness in the left eye for 5 years. It was associated with, 5 days. It was associated with watering, photophobia, and she gave a history, her mother gave a history of a primary complex in childhood. And we did an investigation of this. Manto turned up to be positive. The ESR was also raised. On examination, she had a flectenular keratoconjunctivitis which pointed towards a tuberculous etiology. So this is a picture of flecten. The characteristic lesion is a lot of hyperemia. The lesion will be white in appearance. So raised whitish lesion surrounded by hyperemia is a characteristic description for a flecten, which is associated as a reaction to an endogenous tuberculous protein. So case 5, a 49-year-old female complained of redness in the right eye since 1 week, which is severe boring pain. There was no discharge. Systemic examination revealed swelling of the small joints of the hands. And on examination, oblique examination of the eye revealed right eye scleritis, indicating that she probably had rheumatoid arthritis with scleritis. So this is a picture of scleritis. You can see the sclera thinned out and the uvea seen through the thinned out sclera. So what we are going to see is eye as a mirror for systemic diseases. So in the first case, you told the lag of thalamus and the hypoanesthetic patches. You would have guessed that it was a manifestation of leprosy. The second one, it was a manifestation. The second case was a manifestation of diabetes mellitus. The third one the patient was picked up because of the fundus examination and he was treated for hypertension. The fourth case was a case of flectenular keratoconjunctivitis due to tuberculosis. And the fifth case was a case of scleritis due to rheumatoid arthritis. So what we are going to see today is eye as a mirror for systemic diseases. Eye as a mirror for systemic diseases. So many systemic diseases can have eye manifestations and our aim is to pick them up as early as possible. Sometimes they may be the only presentation or the only clue for you to pick up a systemic disease. So we'll move on to the topic. The leprosy. The highest incidence of ocular complications occur in leprosy, and it is more common in the lepromatous leprosy variety rather than the tuberculoid variety. And what are the manifestations that you'll have? Uveitis. You can have uveitis which can be acute or chronic in nature. And the pathognomonic sign will be the presence of iris pulse, which is nothing but small glistening collections which will be present in the pupillary margin, around the pupillary margin. What will happen as the time passes? These will enlarge, they'll coalesce, form bigger masses, drop into the anterior chamber and slowly disappear. And this will also be associated with miosis and iris atrophy. These are the hypopigmented anesthetic patches. And you can see the iris pearls right here, and on your right side is a histopathological HPE picture, histopathological picture. So these are the iris pearls which are pathognomonic of leprosy. So these are present close to the pupillary margin. When they coalesce, they become bigger and finally drop into the anterior chamber and disappear. So what are the other manifestations of leprosy? In addition to uveitis, uveitis will be the predominant picture, and you know that the pathognomonic manifestation will be an iris pearls. What are the other manifestations? So it can start from the eyebrows. You can have madarosis, that is loss of hair in the, usually in the lateral 1/3 of the eyebrows. And trichiasis is nothing but interning of the eyelashes. Then you can have conjunctivitis, you can have keratitis, you can have scleritis, episcleritis. You can also have facial paralysis, like you saw in the first case discussion. He had a left facial paralysis with corneal anesthesia as well. So they're more prone for developing corneal ulceration. One, because of inability to close the eyelid, because your orbicularis oculi is not functioning, and you have exposure keratitis. Another is because of the involvement of the fifth nerve as well. Because of the involvement of the fifth nerve, we'll have corneal anesthesia, which makes them even more prone to corneal ulceration. So this is a typical picture of a leprosy patient. Look at the shortened fingers and the flattened nose bridge. So coming to diabetes mellitus, diabetes causes a variety of eye manifestations, and for easy remembrance you can go from the lids inwards, that is from the anterior to the posterior direction. So from the lids you can have all types of blepharitis, you can have hardyolum internum or externum. In conjunctiva is nothing much but just sludging of blood in the conjunctival capillaries may be present. And cornea, you have a tendency for recurrent corneal erosions because the adhesion between the basement membrane and the epithelium will be slightly impaired in patients with diabetes mellitus, so they are prone for recurrent corneal erosions. And also any kind of keratitis is common in diabetic patients because it is a slightly immunocompromised condition. Coming to the glaucoma, you can have primary open angle glaucoma or neovascular glaucoma. Neovascular glaucoma is also quite common in diabetic patients, especially those associated with proliferative diabetic retinopathy. So in iris, you can have new vessels over the iris, which is called as rubeosis iridis. Lens, you can have snowflake cataract. This is typically present in insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus patient. And as far as senile cataract is concerned, you have a faster onset and earlier onset and a faster maturation of your senile cataract. In vitreous, you have asteroid hyalosis, which is nothing but precipitation of calcium soaps in the vitreous, which is unilateral in nature. It's commonly seen in diabetic patients. You can also have vitreous hemorrhage as part of your proliferative diabetic retinopathy. Coming to the retina, you have diabetic retinopathy, which can be non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy or proliferative diabetic retinopathy. So coming to snowflake cataract, this is a picture of a snowflake cataract, which is seen in insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus patients. This is a picture of asteroid hyalosis. You're able to see the calcium soaps precipitating in the anterior vitreous. So, optic nerve, you can have anterior ischemic optic neuropathy, optic neuritis, or diabetic papillopathy. Extraocular movements, you can have multiple cranial nerve palsy, especially your pupil sparing. Third nerve palsy can occur in diabetes mellitus patients. Coming to the orbit, orbital cellulitis is common in diabetic patients, as well as mucormycosis. Mucormycosis is a devastating fungal orbital infection which is more common in patients who are having diabetic ketoacidosis, who don't have a very good control of their hyperglycemia. And as far as refraction is concerned, if the patient is not having a very good control, there is hyperglycemia, the patient has a tendency to develop myopia. And if the blood sugar control is good, you have a tendency to go towards a hypermetropic side of refraction. I had a patient who came in with, he was wearing a plus 0.5 glasses, and suddenly he told me that he came in after 2 or 3 years, and he told me that suddenly his vision was very much blurred and he was not able to see the distance. So I found him to be myopic. So a look at his older record showed that he had only a plus 0.5 spear for distance, and now he was having around -2 for distance. And there was no lenticular changes as well, which could explain the myopia. And I asked him whether he was a diabetic. He said no. So we just checked up his. I said we'll just check your blood sugars and then we'll decide. So his fasting blood sugar revealed that he was having around 320 milligrams per deciliter, and he was put on drugs. And after his blood sugars were controlled, we did a refraction once again, and it was in the he returned back to his hypermetropic status. So that is the importance of refraction. Whenever you do refraction in a patient with diabetes, it is important to see that the blood sugar is under control, so that you do not go and give a wrong prescription to those patients. So coming to hypertension, the manifestations of hypertension in the eye may be as hypertensive retinopathy and commonly as a branch retinal vein occlusion, or if atherosclerosis is also the tendency to atherosclerosis is more, you can land up even with a central retinal venous occlusion. So you can have a decreased vision whenever you have a grade 3 hypertensive retinopathy changes, which can be associated with hard exudates depositing in your macular region. And if they are present all around the macula, it is called as macular star. And if it is only present between the disc and the macula, then it is called as a macular fan. And grade 4 hypertensive retinopathy, you will have papillary edema. So uncommonly, you can have a central retinal artery occlusion, anterior ischemic optic neuropathy, as well as cranial nerve palsies. And rarely, as a manifestation, especially of your preeclampsia, you can have a exudative retinal detachment as well. And if you do not control the hypertension, uncontrolled hypertension, and if you are operating on the patient, there is a surgical risk for expulsive hemorrhage in that eye as well. So hypertension can cause hypertensive retinopathy, branch retinal vein occlusion, central retinal vein occlusion. Or if it's a grade 4 hypertensive retinopathy, you can have papillary edema associated with that. And you could see that from the case which I presented, that the patient had a grade 4 hypertensive retinopathy at that stage. And also one of the uncommon manifestations, as well as a rare presentation of exudative retinal detachment as well. We'll move on to the next topic. And so you can see the picture of a branch retinal vein occlusion. So these are multiple hemorrhages which are scattered throughout the fundus. Which are scattered along the course of the supratemporal artery. So this is a supratemporal branch retinal vein occlusion. So tuberculosis. So one of the common manifestations will be a flectanular keratoconjunctivitis, which is nothing but a reaction to an endogenous antigen such as a tuberculous antigen. Remember, flectanular keratoconjunctivitis can also occur in staphylococcal blepharitis as well. So it is important to rule that out as well. So it can cause chronic iridocyclitis, which is commonly of granulomatous variety. Rarely it may be non-granulomatous as well. Choroiditis, which may be unilateral or multifocal in nature. So here you are able to see multiple foci of choroiditis, which is multifocal choroiditis due to tuberculosis, and here you are able to see a single solitary choroidal granuloma due to tuberculosis. So tuberculosis, these are some of the uncommon manifestations of tuberculosis only. So solitary choroidal granuloma is very rare, and very often it's mistaken for a tumor. And you can also have manifestations like retinal periphlebitis or a panuveitis picture because of tuberculosis. So moving on to rheumatoid arthritis. The commonest manifestations of rheumatoid arthritis will be keratoconjunctivitis sicca, otherwise known as dry eye syndrome, or DES or KCS. Then you can have scleritis and peripheral ulcerative keratitis, and also very rarely you can have acquired superior oblique tendon sheath syndrome. So keratoconjunctivitis sicca will be more common in rheumatoid arthritis than the other manifestations, scleritis or peripheral ulcerative keratitis. So this is a picture of rheumatoid arthritis showing a scleritis on your left side and rheumatoid arthritis features on your. So this is scleritis. You can see the congestion in the eye, and this is a picture of rheumatoid arthritis where you have a swan-like deformity of the fingers and ulnar deviation at the metacarpophalangeal joints, as well as a botanial deformity of the thumb. So moving on to SLE or systemic lupus erythematosus, it is commonly associated with madarosis. I told you loss of hair from the eyebrows. Keratoconjunctivitis sicca or dry eye syndrome, peripheral ulcerative keratitis, scleritis, retinal vasculitis, as well as optic neuropathy. So this is the typical malar rash or butterfly rash seen in a patient with systemic lupus erythematosus, and you can see the vasculitis picture with hemorrhages, cottonwool spots, and inflamed blood vessels. So moving on to human immunodeficiency virus. So in the eyelids you can have Kaposi sarcoma, you can have molluscum contagiosum, or you can have herpes zoster ophthalmicus. Any young patient who is manifesting with herpes zoster ophthalmicus. So herpes zoster ophthalmicus is a disease of old age. And suppose you see a young patient with herpes zoster, always it should ring a bell in your mind that it could be HIV. I once had a patient who developed herpes zoster ophthalmicus as a 35-year-old. He was found to be HIV positive. So in conjunctiva, you can have Kaposi sarcoma, you can have squamous cell carcinoma, as well as any microangiopathy. And in cornea, you can have microsporidium keratitis, herpes simplex virus, or herpes zoster virus keratitis. Dry eye syndrome is also a common accompanying feature of HIV infection. So remember, Kaposi sarcoma is a tumor which occurs in human immunodeficiency virus infection. So you can have anterior uveitis because of HIV. In addition, you can have HIV retinopathy, which will predominantly have lots of cottonwool spots will be there. Occasionally, you can have superficial hemorrhage or microaneurysms. And retinitis, CMV retinitis, cytomegalovirus retinitis, which is a very devastating viral infection which occurs in HIV patients, or varicella zoster virus, which may be associated with progressive outer retinal necrosis. And choroiditis, you can have choroiditis because of opportunistic infections like Pneumocystis carinii as well as some Cryptococcus. Very rarely you can have a B-cell intraocular lymphoma as well in these immunocompromised patients. So remember, HIV retinopathy, there are lots of cottonwool spots. Also remember CMV retinitis. So this is a picture of HIV retinopathy. You can see the amount of cottonwool spots that are there. And below is a picture of a cytomegalovirus retinitis, where there is a lot of cottonwool spots, phlebitis, as well as a lot of hemorrhages around the vessels. And it's typically called as a brush fire like extension along retinal blood vessels. Okay, so there's a lot of dense white geographical area for opacification, which is associated with vasculitis as well as vitritis, and there will be a gradual spread which is associated with lots of hemorrhage. So areas of opacification associated with vasculitis, vitritis, and hemorrhages. So it has a brush fire like appearance, which is very typical in the case of CMV retinitis or cytomegalovirus retinitis, commonly seen in patients with HIV. So moving on to neurofibromatosis, you have two types, neurofibromatosis 1 and neurofibromatosis 2. Neurofibromatosis 1, you will have eyelid neurofibromas, which will give a typical S-shaped the lid margin, usually in the upper lid. And then you have lesion nodules, which are just hypopigmented nodules which can be present in the over the iris. And you can have optic nerve glioma. There will also be prominent corneal nerves as well as iris mammillations can be there. Rarely you can have sphenoorbital encephalocele as well as choroidal melanoma associated with this neuropathy. neurofibromatosis 1. So eyelid neurofibromas, leash nodules, rarely optic nerve glioma, prominent corneal nerves, iris mammillations, sphenoorbital encephalocele and choroidal melanoma. Okay, so these are nothing but neurofibromas which are present in the back, and these are capsulite spots which look like spilled over coffee. So these are leash nodules. If the iris is of a lighter color, they'll appear slightly darker. And here you can see light colored ones. And this is a unilateral optic nerve glioma in a patient with neurofibromatosis. And neurofibromatosis is associated with early onset of cataract, ophthalmoplegia, and sometimes you can have combined retinal as well as retinal pigment epithelium hamartomas, as also epiretinal membrane. So that is neurofibromatosis 2. It is commonly associated with acoustic neuromas. Bilateral as well. Bilateral acoustic neuromas is a common accompaniment of your neurofibromatosis 2. Moving on to syphilis. It is associated with madarosis and interstitial keratitis, especially your congenital syphilis varieties. You may have interstitial keratitis, and you can also have anterior uveitis as well as chorioretinitis. You can have periarteritis and neuroretinitis. It is called neuroretinitis when there is an optic disc edema associated with exudates in the macular region. Okay, so optic neuritis plus exudates in the macular region, you'll call it as a separate term, neuroretinitis. And neuroretinitis is usually not a manifestation of multiple sclerosis because there will not be any macular involvement, because the myelination of the nerve fiber starts with the disc. You will not have any involvement of the macula in a patient with a multiple sclerosis. So that is rarely you can have Argyll-Robertson pupil and nerve palsies. So in syphilis you can have madarosis, you can have interstitial keratitis, anterior uveitis, chorioretinitis, periarteritis, neuroretinitis, and rarely you can have Argyll-Robertson pupil as well as nerve palsies. So this is neuroretinitis I was talking to you. There is a disc edema. You can see the margins are all slightly blurred and fuzzy, and you can see a lot of hard exudates with edema surrounding the fovea. This is a picture of a interstitial keratitis in a patient with congenital syphilis. So then we'll move on to only salient features. So in Marfan syndrome and homocystinuria, there are a lot of systemic diseases which involve the eye. You could spend a whole lot of day trying to figure out all the features, but I think it's better to be crisp so that your interest is retained. So we'll move on to salient features of certain important diseases, and you should know that most of the systemic diseases have a tendency to affect the uvea, because the uvea is a very highly vascular structure, and these systemic infections, all these systemic diseases have a tendency to involve the uvea more than other structures. So what are the salient features? In Marfan's and homocystinuria, you will have what is called a subluxation of the lens or ectopic position of the lens. Ectopia lent to subluxation of the lens. And in multiple sclerosis, you will have optic neuritis, you can have internuclear ophthalmoplegia, and it's also a rare cause of intermediate uveitis. Moving on to giant cell arteritis, you can have anterior ischemic optic neuropathy, you can have central retinal artery occlusion, cortical spots, and very rarely cranial nerve palsies can also occur in giant cell arteritis. So this is a case of a Marfan syndrome. You can notice the increased arm span, which is greater than the height, and this is a subluxated lens which is seen in Marfan syndrome. And in Marfan's, the subluxation is usually superotemporal, whereas in homocystinuria it will be inferonasal in location. So sarcoidosis. Sarcoidosis is one another important disease which has a tendency to affect the uvea. You can have conjunctival granulomas, anterior, posterior uveitis, or panuveitis. It's one of the important causes for your panuveitis. You can also have dry eye syndrome as well as granulomas in the uvea also. Granulomas in the posterior, as part of your posterior uveitis. So you can have conjunctival granulomas, you can have anterior, posterior or panuveitis, you can have granulomas in the choroid, or you can have dry eye syndrome as well. Stooge-Weber syndrome, where a hemangioma in the face is associated with ipsilateral glaucoma on that side, and choroidal hemangioma as well. And Behçet's disease, you can have anterior uveitis, vitritis, retinitis, and periphlebitis. Is usually associated with aphthous stomatitis as well as genital ulcerations. So this is a picture of your facial hemangioma, which is also associated with choroidal hemangioma. And plain X-rays of the skull will also give you a tram tract calcification in your brain, and it may also be associated with leptomeningeal hemangiomas as well. So this is Behçet's syndrome. It's associated with relapsing uveitis, recurring genital ulcers, and also recurring oral ulcers. The ulcers will tend to have a red rim with a necrotic center. And finally, coronavirus conjunctivitis. Coronavirus can also cause pink eye or conjunctivitis, and rarely it may be associated with orbital cellulitis as well. Take care and stay safe. Clean your hands, wear a face mask whenever you go out, maintain 2 meter social distancing. So, I request all of you to stay safe and take care of yourselves as well as those surrounding you. Thank you.